Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to welcome you to your Sacramento Philharmonic Opera. Thank you for joining us for this pre-concert lecture, conversation, inside Juicy Scoop with the wonderful performers themselves. My name is Lora Painter. I am the weekday evening anchor for ABC 10 here in Sacramento. And I want to introduce our stars for the evening, conductor Dougie Boyd.
Nice to be here.
And award-winning pianist Janice Carissa.
Pleasure to be here.
So I want to start with you, Dougie. You have been performing around the world, and you live in London right now, so thank you for being here all the way in Sacramento. A wonderful weekend, finally, for the new year, so it's great that both of you have brought the sunshine and the positive energy that we so much needed in 2023. And I wanted to ask about your background. I read that you are an accomplished oboist.
Well, I was an accomplished oboist in the past. Yeah.
What drew you to that instrument, and then how did you switch course to be a conductor?
I'll try and keep this short, but maybe it is an interesting story. It kind of found me. I was brought up in Glasgow. You can probably hear from my accent. I'm Scottish, and it was a very lucky time in Glasgow because all instruments were free for kids, all lessons were free, and we had a whole culture of youth orchestras, youth orchestra courses in the summer, where we had an absolute riot. And so I didn't really know anything about anything. I knew what a clarinet was, and they were fresh out of clarinets at school, and so they said, why don't you try an oboe? So it was completely by chance. And then fast forward many years, I went to study at the Royal Academy of Music in London, and then I found it along with some colleagues, having played in an incredible youth orchestra called the European Youth Orchestra, which had an extraordinary talented and amazing people from all over Europe, and we were conducted by Claudio Abbado and Herbert von Karajan and all the great conductors and soloists of the time. And a group of us, because there was an age limit for the youth orchestra, decided that we wanted to create a professional orchestra which had some of the spirit and friendships and excellence of the youth orchestra, and we founded the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, and I was principal oboe in the chamber, which I can say this now because I'm not in it. It remains one of the great orchestras of the world, and I was in the Chamber Orchestra of Europe with Claudio Abbado for 21 years, but I always had this itch to conduct. And I just decided that I would like not to be in my 80s if I ever get there, and look back and think I always wanted to, but it never happened. So it started quite modestly, but to my surprise, actually, it turned. At the beginning, I was playing maybe 80% in conducting, 20%, but it very swiftly turned the other way around, and so eventually I put my oboe in the box and put it under the bed, and I have a new life as a conductor. That's the short story.
Wonderful. And Janice, I wanted to ask you, you're from Indonesia.
Indeed.
Yeah, what was it like growing up there? Tell us about the music culture in that country. Is classical music very popular? How did you get into piano?
Absolutely. So I was very fortunate to grow up in a musical household. I really do owe everything that I have today to my mother, who was my teacher for the entire time I grew up in Indonesia up until I moved to Philadelphia in 2013 to study at Curtis. And so the sound of piano was always emanating from the walls. I was definitely one of those kids who are touching everything that I'm not supposed to touch. So no matter how hard my mom tries, I'm always climbing the chair, just like prodding a finger down on the black and white keys. And that's kind of the beginning of the journey. And so in terms of the music scene, it certainly has been developing a lot in the last 30 years, especially. I'm from Surabaya, which is in East Java. It's about 30-minute flight from Bali, so that's kind of a geographical idea. And so I was very lucky that on my mom's side, both her and her sister and her aunt all have music schools. So then I would just jump from one school to the next and play a lot of different music. But of course, when I grew up, actually, not only did I play classical music, my mom teaches an improvisation class. And so we got to improvise on weekends and then do solfege. And then like theory things. I was very lucky to be able to explore all genres of music going on.
Wow, and I want to say she attends Juilliard as well.
Currently going to Juilliard for my master's, so we'll be in New York for the next 2 years.
And she plays wonderfully, I should add. Yeah.
You're very kind. It's so fun to be here. I'm really thinking myself right now. A great honor to be playing along your side.
So, I want to ask, what kind of music do you listen to on your off time when you're not studying, you know, the stuff that you got to do for work?
Actually, you might be horrified to hear this, but I don't listen to much music because I'm playing and listening to music for studying nearly all the time. So, of course, sometimes there'll be some Bach on the radio and I'll want to hear it or whatever. But I tend to listen to podcasts, and I love sport, so that could be, you know. So I'm quite a radio fanatic, but I tend not to go to the music station because music's so much part of my life for nearly 24 hours a day that I don't need it when I'm not actually studying. But I'm not. In terms of other music, it's interesting you say classical music. I don't like the term classical. I think we need to get away from that. What we play is great music. We play the greatest music, and I think it's very dangerous to compartmentalize it and say, you know, we do something. Immediately it sounds old-fashioned, and it's not old-fashioned. It's the greatest. That's why we play it today, because it's the greatest music by some of the greatest people that ever lived.
I really do love that mindset, because it really helps keep it alive and make it accessible and draw interest of people who like all different kinds of music too. And there's a place for them in that as well.
Yeah, and I think if we can manage to grasp young people as we were grasped when we were kids, before you have preconceptions about what is popular and what is not popular, then you actually realize the real value of what we do, you know, and it's about our humanity, and it's incredibly important.
I love it. And we're going to be performing Ravel's Concerto in G. I was listening to it all day, as maybe some of you will have been as well. Janice, it must be so fun to play that on the piano. It is just so joyful, and it mixes a lot of different forms. It's a little bit of watery Debussy, it's a little jazzy, it's a little Gershwin. I mean, it's just so rumpus in a way. What do you feel when you play that piece?
It's always a thrill because the writing itself on the piano is very orchestral. You're really mimicking so many different types of instruments on the piano. Like the opening is something that's just like spinning, something really bright, and then of course there's the gliss that is just like so. Every single time you play, you just feel yourself like growing wings on the back, and then you're just like launching to the sky. And of course, the blues, the influence of the blues and the jazz, it's just so fun, because really I think what he asks of you is really to have fun and have a groovy time. And so that element of excitement, exuberance is something that is spread throughout the entire piece. But of course, something that is really special to me about this piece is the middle movement, of course, where it just feels like time stops and you're kind of just zooming out and just really you're in this magical other world.
And it's one of the greatest melodies, I think, in any literature, is the slow movement, which Janice has at the beginning. It's solo piano without orchestra, and then the heart of the slow movement is it's turned round where the English horn, the cor anglais, has the melody, and it's incredibly soulful and touching and moving. And then the pianist becomes a true Janice becomes a true accompanist and is actually accompanying the cor anglais, the English horn. Yeah.
And what is it like for you to conduct a concerto? Do you get into a different mindset when you have to control these different...
Yeah, it's a different psychology. I hope Janice agrees with me. But you know, I'm here to facilitate Janice and to. So it's different from the symphony in that, of course, I have views on the interpretation, particularly in the orchestral parts. but I think I have a, I've sat on the other side of the fence because I was an oboe player and I did have a solo career and I played with orchestras. I think I know what it's like a little bit to be on that side of the fence, so it's really important that I'm here for you and to make it a fantastic success for Janice. That's the aim. Anyway.
I certainly feel that way whenever I play. He's always there every step of the way. It's could not have done it.
And maybe it's an interesting thing, I mean, we got together yesterday.
Yep,
Yeah, that's it. And then we have a concert today, and it's amazing. I'm always in awe of our profession, actually, of how the incredible preparation that goes in before you even get together, and then the time management that you have to do in order to make it feel that you've completely been together for years. But in fact, the secret is we just met yesterday.
Isn't that amazing? It really just speaks to your skill, your knowledge, professionalism, to be able to just blend so quickly, as if you had known each other and played together, like in a band, so to speak, in a rock band, together for so many years.
Of course, it sometimes can go really wrong where you don't have a good rapport, and then you just have to find a way.
So how do you work around that?
Well, I think it would depend on the conductor. I still think that if you start from the mindset that I'm here to facilitate, then even if it's somebody that you don't particularly have a fantastic marriage of minds or soul, you still have that responsibility to make it work for the soloist.
Interesting.
Yeah, I especially agree with that, and I think that's why I'm so drawn into this music world, because despite your differences, really, if you love something so much, then you're willing to put aside your differences and make it work. So there's that element of humility that I find very inspiring, and certainly something that I try to take into my everyday life as well, outside of music. Yeah.
And it's just, maybe I'm speaking the obvious, but it's such a universal language. Here you've got an orchestra from the United States, a soloist from Indonesia, and a conductor from Scotland, and we're all making music together, and we all speak the same language. And isn't that wonderful?
I think so.
It's a beautiful thing. That does deserve a round of applause. That's why we're all here tonight, too. Different generations, different backgrounds, all coming together to enjoy the same pieces of music that are within themselves more than a century apart, with such different historical contexts that the composers and the lives that they were living at the time they wrote those pieces too. So on another personal note, Janice, I wanted to ask, how do you mentally prepare for a concert? I'm a pianist myself, not nearly as well as you, but that mindset, how do you do lots of warm-ups and keep your fingers warm, or how do you kind of physically and mentally prepare? Does it differ with the songs that you're performing?
I think, for me personally, especially on the day of, it's about really slowing down my center, and just trying to put myself in a more objective place. Because really, when we're making music, I think it's not so much about me, it's more about the music that we're so fortunate to be able to play today. And so I actually try to be more objective and slow down, eat a banana, because that's, maybe it's placebo, but but that's what really helps put me in the mood. And of course, can't underestimate the power of power naps. So personally, those are my two things. Yeah.
That's good advice. And then for yourself too, Dougie, how do you mentally prepare to command a big orchestra?
Sleep before is essential, I find, especially at my age. And then I feel I'm completely refreshed. And other than that, the preparation, it's slightly different because there's the physical element of playing the instrument, whereas with the conductor, we don't make a noise, we need an orchestra. So the preparation all happens in the rehearsals. And in fact, the concert is just something that's, if the rehearsal has gone well, that's a kind of joyful experience that you look forward to because you've done the work. The most nerve-wracking moments when you meet an orchestra for the very first time. You've got 100 people in front of you you've never seen before. Good morning, let's start with Beethoven. And you've got a very limited time to make a connection and to buy into. There is no truth, but you buy into our truth for this week only in terms of an interpretation. Playing together is not really that. Of course, it's important, but it's not that interesting. That's the least interesting thing. The most interesting thing is if you can, like, find a vision for this piece, for this week, in the same way as there are a million ways of performing Hamlet, and you need a director to bring incredible actors together to find a way still respecting the actors, and it's the same as the job of the conductor, it's the same.
I really appreciate that insight because you guys make it seem so easy. And yet that you've known each other forever, and that really speaks to the professionalism and experience that this team has here. I wanted to ask you guys about the music itself and learn about the pieces, since you are also students and historians of music as well. Starting with the Beethoven, I found it so interesting as I was researching this. Of course, Eroica, meaning heroic, and we know its ties during the Napoleonic Wars, and I was reminded that it was dedicated to Bonaparte, but then that dedication was rescinded. So that's very interesting. Dougie, I wanted to ask you about the historical impact of pieces as far as how much they influence, how much of that history do you take with you in interpreting a piece, and Janice, you as well. I'll ask you about that as well when you are performing, so the history, context.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. It's a great question. I think it's really important to understand the context, and especially perhaps in Beethoven, because I certainly believe that every symphony it has a narrative, and they're often one symphony. The symphony that follows the preceding symphony, if you like, is a bit like two arguments are having, two friends are having a very intense argument, but it is a friendly argument, if you like, about what the world is like, you know. And if you think later in the symphonic cycle, the Fifth Symphony, I mean, I'm being a little bit simplistic, but the Fifth Symphony is really about being free from tyranny. You start in tyranny and then you end in freedom. And then the Sixth Symphony, it's like this imaginary friend saying, no, that's not what the world is like. It's about nature, and it's about thanking God for the trees and the flowers and the incredible beauty around us. And then the Seventh Symphony is like saying, no, it's about the humanity of dance. Without dancing, we can't do anything. So there are always these arguments that go on in his symphony. And in the Eroica, yeah, it was written for Napoleon, who he was kind of mesmerized by at one point in his life, and he dedicated to it. But he was hopeful that Napoleon would be, because he had risen from almost nowhere, would respect that he was a man of the people. And when he declared himself emperor after the French Revolution, that was what absolutely decided this is not the person for me, and he tore up the dedication, but he'd written it by then. Mm-hmm. But if I can, I don't want to take up more time, but going back to, you know, why this music's so great and why it's so important, I think, is that of all the composers, he's not alone in this, but he's perhaps one of the great examples of what Beethoven can express. And he can express love and joy and beauty, but he can also express terror and grief. And the amazing thing about the Eroica Symphony is it's perhaps the first really great example in music where all these emotions of the human spirit are expressed. So you have, again, I'm paraphrasing, but you have the kind of heroism of the first movement, and then in the second movement it's a funeral march. It's been described as like walking through a battlefield where there are dead bodies. It's grief on a scale unimaginable, but expressed through sound. And then the third movement is based on a drinking song. It's about dance. It's about humanity, and what makes us human. And then do tell me to shut up if I'm talking too long. But then the fourth movement is also very important, I think, in terms of going back to Napoleon and what he felt about Napoleon. There's a kind of avalanche of sound at the beginning of the fourth movement, and then you'll hear just pizzicato. Boom, bim, boom, bim, boom, 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 boom. It's kind of goofy. It's not really a melody. It's barely a tune, and yet from this embryo the most, through variations and through different kinds of form, the most unbelievable music erupts. And somewhere I think there's a message, which I'm sure, you know, was part of the American dream, that somewhere from no matter how simple a background, there is the possibility that you can develop into greatness. And I think that's the message of the last movement of Eroica. I talk too much, but
no, thank you for that description from the maestro himself. I'm very excited to hear. And thank you for describing the different movements. I was reading about the funeral march, and that was also played at FDR's funeral and also for JFK's funeral as well. And who doesn't like an allegro con brio, right? Fast with fire, and that's what we're going to start with. That's so exciting. And then Janice says, well, do you bring yourself to 1930s France, Paris, you know, jazzy age when you play Ravel? What kind of mindset do you get into? Do you imagine being in that world, or maybe him living now, or where does your thought process go?
Absolutely. Well, the 1920s, 1930s was a time when there was a great new genres being created, and of course at the time jazz was something that was becoming international, and when it arrived to France, Ravel was very fascinated by that. And in fact he was actually greatly inspired by George Gershwin, who had premiered the Rhapsody in Blue in, I believe it was 1924 or 1925, and the Concerto came in 1932. And actually that idea of blue, the blue note, which is a note that bends, is something that he took further in this piece, because, for example, after the great opening of the first movement, the piano solo comes in and it goes like da-da-da, ya-da-da, it's like da-da. Yeah. And then of course in the cadenza in the first movement where the right hand is just trilling, I think, I believe Messiaen at the time was fascinated by a new instrument that was, I think, some sort of theremin, which is this instrument where it's like, it's vibrating and it doesn't break, it goes like that, and the trill goes on for 2 pages. It goes for a while, and that again is the idea of bending the sound that he's trying to explore, because really the piano instrument is, we're so lucky because it's such a, even though it's called a percussive instrument, it has so much nuances, and I think really in here he's trying to explore the different timbres and everything about the instrument. And so I think that's like something that I've been very fascinated by the piece.
Well, thank you. We can't wait to see and hear all of these musical thoughts and your talents themselves here on stage. They need to start getting ready now, but thank you so much for joining us in our pre-concert talk.